the difference between the Thunderbolt and the Xtool P2? Today we're going to be talking about the key differences and the things that you really need to focus on in order to make the best decision for which machine you should go with. Okay guys, my name is Grant and I'm the sales manager here at Thunder Laser USA. So with that being said, I have an inherent bias towards the Thunderbolt versus the P2, but I'm going to do the best that I possibly can to give you factual information about speeds, specs, how long it takes to do certain things, how thick they can cut, and take my opinions and my bias out of this. And if at the end of the video you decide that you want the Thunder or the Xtool P2, it's your decision, but I'm going to give you all the information that I can. The Xtool P2 is currently listed at $4,500, whereas the Thunderbolt is listed at $5,500. Now, that is standalone. It comes with the machine and nothing else. So the P2, $4,500 for just the machine. You don't get the riser base, rotary, or anything like that. And the Bolt for $5,500 is just the machine with the standard lens. You don't get a rotary. So I just wanted to throw that out there. You're not getting any of the additional features for that price. That is the baseline price. Now, with that being said, there's extra things you can add on, like I just hinted towards. Like for the Bolt, you can get a rotary, you can get different lenses to achieve different jobs, and then for the Xtool P2, you can get the riser base, you can get a rotary, you can get the pass-through auto feed, I forget what it's called, the conveyor system I think is what they've called it. So all of those are options to add on, so the price would increase, but we're today going to be talking about the standalone price. Another thing I want to mention when talking about pricing is both machines currently have shipping included in the pricing. Now, for the Thunderbolt, and I believe also for the Xtool P2, that standard shipping is only included to the lower 48. So you're not going to get free shipping if you're in Alaska or Hawaii. That's going to be an additional fee. One of the most important things to consider when you're getting a laser machine is how fast it can engrave. The Xtool P2 engraves up to 600 millimeters a second, whereas the Thunderbolt can engrave up to 1000 millimeters a second. To test the engraving speeds with real-world projects, what I decided to do was to buy a few items that I've seen people engrave and cut before, and to run each machine at its optimal speed and power. So I didn't go full blast on either one of them. I went at the speed and power that I thought best suited the outcome. So for the best engrave, that's really what the goal that I had was. Show me the best engrave that I can get and let the speed and power fall where it may. So some of the things that we did are a cutting board, a flask, leatherette patch, slate coaster, a curved tray to show off the curved surface feature, and then a 1/2-inch acrylic cut. Now the first thing being the cutting board. So the cutting boards that you see here on the Bolt, it took 10 minutes and 15 seconds to engrave. And then on the P2, it took 19 minutes and 41 seconds. So let's call it 10 minutes versus 20 minutes. So the Bolt was twice as fast at engraving one cutting board when compared to the P2. The next thing was the flask. So you can see the flask here. People will do these for like whiskey and what have you, but you can also do cups on both machines if you get the attachments, but I wanted to show something that had a coating over metal so that you could see that both machines can engrave a coating off and then show the metal back. But for how long this took on each machine, the P2 took 6 minutes and 41 seconds, whereas the Thunderbolt took 2 minutes and 42 seconds. So 2 minutes and 40 seconds versus 6 minutes and 40 seconds. This one was 4 minutes faster on this item. Next would be the leatherette patch. So we engraved and cut the leatherette patch, which you can see here. And on the Bolt, it took 1 minute and 49 seconds to engrave and then cut this out, whereas on the P2, it took 6 minutes and 10 seconds. Mind you, like I said earlier, I'm not going as fast as both machines can go. The Bolt definitely could have gone a lot faster. The P2 could have gone a lot faster. But I'm going for the best quality result that I can possibly get. So this one, 1 minute 50 seconds on the Bolt, 6 minutes and 10 seconds on the P2. Next would be the slate coaster, which I don't have with me right now, unfortunately. I actually gave it to Elijah, who's behind the camera today, and we forgot to have that here for the video. But you'll see some clips of it here that Elijah's gonna put up for us. The Bolt did it in 3 minutes and 37 seconds, and the P2 did it in 8 minutes and 57 seconds. So roughly 5 minutes faster on the Bolt. Now the curved tray is something I want to talk about. So with these two here, you see it's got a dip to it, and the Xtool P2 has a pretty cool feature that allows for the machine to drop the head down to go into these dips or curves into materials. And we don't have that feature on any of our Thunder lasers. However, as you'll see in the clip that Elijah's gonna put up, if you use the 2.5-inch lens or the 4-inch lens, you can gain extra clearance to cover the distance from the laser head. So the specific lens will allow the laser beam to travel further, and it will be able to engrave a curved surface like it did here. So this one here is from the P2, and this one here is from the Bolt. You can achieve the same exact result in much less time on this machine. So on the Bolt, this took 2 minutes and 37 seconds. Whereas on the P2, this took 23 minutes and 48 seconds. The reason for the huge difference there is because the P2, the max speed that you can go with their curved surface feature is 100 millimeters a second. That is the fastest it'll allow you to go. Whereas on the Bolt, I think I went like 600 or 700 millimeters a second on this. So that's a pretty big difference in overall speed. The last thing that I did is something that I've seen in the P2 ads. That's cutting 1/2-inch acrylic. So with the clips that Elijah's gonna put up here for us, you see that both the Thunderbolt being a 30-watt RF laser tube and the P2 being a 55-watt glass CO2 tube, they both can cut 1/2-inch acrylic. Now you'll say that the Xtool ads were actually 3/4-inch acrylic. You can cut 3/4-inch acrylic with both of these machines as well, but this is what I had here at the shop today. I had 1/2-inch acrylic. One of the reasons why you really want to know what the engraving speeds translate to is because your engraving speeds can limit how quickly you can produce product and make money. The next thing I want to talk about here is what the cutting capabilities are of these two machines, being that they have two different types of tubes and they're two different wattages. So I just touched on this a second ago with saying that the P2 has a 55-watt glass tube, whereas the Thunderbolt has a 30-watt RF tube. I don't want to get into the weeds with this, but an RF tube stands for radio frequency, and the beam of an RF tube is much smaller than that of a beam of a glass tube. So even though it's a lower wattage laser tube on the Bolt, the beam is much smaller, so it packs more of a punch, I guess we could say. So really the best way to compare is a 30-watt RF tube is roughly about a 50 to 60-watt glass tube. With that being said, both machines can cut the same thicknesses. Through the tests that I ran, I didn't find that one outperformed the other with cutting. So the cutting speeds came out the same. The Bolt was just able to get a smaller curve size. All right, so the next question that you may ask is like, how thick can each one of these machines cut, right? Well, they can cut up to 3/4-inch acrylic, but I would not buy the machines for cutting that thick. Really, the sweet spot for either one of these machines is gonna be around 1/4 of an inch. Now, you can get thicker than that if you slow the machine down quite a bit or do multiple passes. But again, the sweet spot is 1/4 of an inch either way you go. Next topic is build quality. So what kind of components are these machines made of? What is the quality control that goes into putting these things together? How long do they last? That sort of thing. So the one thing that I want to note with the P2 is that it's got a plastic outer shell, and a lot of the internals are encapsulated by plastic pieces. So as we know, plastic doesn't last as long as metal does. So this machine is built to last. It's industrial. It's just something that is for high production. You're gonna use it for years and years and years to come, whereas something that's made out of plastic, hopefully you get that longevity out of it, but you don't know for sure because it's made out of a material that isn't as durable. So to piggyback off of that, the point that I made earlier about the glass tube versus the RF tube, a glass tube, like what's on the P2, is cooled by water. So the tube will heat up and it needs some way to cool down or else it'll burst, right? So the P2 has a small little, I guess you would call it a water pump or a water reservoir. That's not gonna do a great job at keeping your machine cool in extreme temperatures, being it hot or cold. So you're really limited to the type of environment that you can use a machine like this in, whereas the Bolt here has the RF tube and it's cooled by air. You don't need a chiller. So you can operate at a wider range of temperatures, being the low end and the high end. And to add to the RF tube there, so the RF tube will actually last much longer than a glass tube. A glass tube, you're gonna get around 2,000 to 4,000 working hours if it's a good quality one. A RF tube, like what's on the Bolt, can last up to 10,000 working hours. So you're gonna get a lot longer lifespan. It's a higher quality tube. The beam is smaller. It's just a better built machine. What kind of support do each one of these companies have? So I'll tell you that with the Xtool P2, I've reached out to Xtool 2 or 3 times with questions I had mostly relating to software. And what I got was an AI generated response. That was the first response I got. And I think within that email, it asked me, did this answer your question? If not, let us know. So I said, no, that didn't answer my question. Well, I didn't get a real response from an actual technician until a day later. I don't know if that's the case for every question that you have, but my experience was I had to wait about a day to hear back for an answer to my question. Whereas with us, Thunder Laser USA, our technicians do not give automated responses. You ask them a question, they get back to you generally within about 10 minutes. You can see our reviews online, they echo that. People love our quick response times. And it's not only that we're responding quickly, we're responding quickly with answers to your question that get you moving along the right path. Some of these AI generated responses don't answer your question at all. And it's more of when you ask the question that you're looking for an answer, they answer with a question. So you're waiting again a day for each and every response. Whereas like I said, for us, you're waiting about 10 minutes at the worst. And if you really start to think about that, if you have one issue with your machine, that can drag out over days or weeks or months if you're waiting constantly for a response. Whereas with us, something that may take a week with Xtool would take an hour because of our response times. What features do these machines have that really set them apart from everybody else? So one of them, I already talked about earlier in this video, it was the curved surface engraving. And so like I stated in that section of the video, the Xtool P2 can only go up to 100 millimeters a second when you're doing the curved surface engraving. I will give it some props though, because that has more functionality to account for more of a curve than what you can with the adjustments that I made on the bolt. But the problem is you're limited so much to the actual speed that you can go, how long it takes to engrave something. And for my 4 years of experience working with lasers, there's not been one time where I've needed to engrave on something curved like that, where the 4-inch or the 2.5-inch lens wouldn't have done the job. The next thing would be the camera. So both machines have cameras. The Xtool has a little bit different camera setup because they have 2 cameras. One that's positioned on the laser head itself, and then another that's positioned kind of away in the cabinet of the machine. And both of them are really used to use a picture of what's in your bed, and then allows you to drag and drop your design over the top of that material. It will measure the distance from the material to the laser head so that you're properly focused, right? Because just like that curved surface feature, the laser head on the P2, it drops out of the housing. Instead of the bed moving up and down, the head drops down. Whereas on the bolt, it's got autofocus, so the bed will come up, it'll hit the peg sensor, and then it'll bounce the material down out of the way. The Thunderbolt is compatible with Lightburn software, which is the most widely used software on the market, and you'll see that it is very user-friendly. There's tons of tutorial videos and things like that, whereas the XCS software, at least to my knowledge, is relatively new. The big drawback to the XCS software is it's really limiting on how you can control your machine, whereas Lightburn is your gateway to be able to control any fine detail of your machine. So I will say the XCS software might be a little more user-friendly for somebody who's never touched a laser before, but pretty quickly, after a couple weeks, you're gonna realize, I can't do the things that everybody else can do because my machine won't allow me to adjust that. So I lean myself more towards Lightburn just because of the ability to have more control, the additional knowledge base and resources that are out there about Lightburn for all the different companies and brands that use Lightburn. There's just more resources for you to learn. Optional accessories is the next topic here. So we talked a little bit about these at the beginning of the video. Both of these machines, we tested them stock with what they come with, whereas there are some additional things that you can buy with each machine. The Xtool has the riser tray, which gives you more Z-depth, so you can work on taller items. It also has a rotary, which is for cups. It has an air assist add-on that you can, it helps eliminate some of the charring. Like so if you see here around the engrave, you have a lot of charring. The air assist add-on will allow you to control that, so you're not having so much of that around it. Another feature that the Xtool P2 has that you can purchase is the fume extractor. Now you can get a fume extractor with any machine that you purchase from anybody, but it is something that you can get directly from them. For the bolt, we've got the rotary. There's a few different options there, depending on what it is you're looking to use a rotary for. So we've got a chuck rotary that grabs the item and rotates it, versus a roller rotary that some people refer to as a hot dog roller. So you set a cup on there and then it just rotates on some wheels. Each one has some different use cases, but they will both in the end do the same thing. There's another thing, the lenses that you can purchase with the machine. So the lenses will give you different capabilities for your machine. So earlier I was talking about with light burn, you can control more of what your machine is capable of doing, right? Well, the lenses also offer that same thing. Now, the last thing that I'll mention is there's a rotary tray option for the bolt. So that's something that you can put into the base of the machine to get you more clearance for engraving taller items. So a lot of people want to engrave those Stanley tumblers and engrave all the way around. It's called a full wrap. So you would want to get the rotary tray so you have the additional clearance to clear over the tabs that come from the handle on that cup. Let's talk about some of the specs of these machines. So the first thing that I want to touch on is the size. So the bolt is definitely heavier. It's 175 pounds versus 100 pounds, but the overall dimensions of the machines, the P2 is 39 inches by 25 inches by 11 inches. So it's 39 left to right, 29 front to back, and then 11 inches tall. Whereas the bolt is 36 left to right, it's 27 front to back, and 18 inches tall. So this is a girthier unit, I would say, but it's 18 inches tall because you get that additional clearance, whereas the P2, you'd have to get that riser base to get the clearance. The next thing is the DPI. So what resolution, how high of a quality of a photo can you engrave with these machines? Stock, the way this machine comes, you can get 762 DPI, which honestly is pretty good. But with the bolt and the 1.5 inch lens, you can get up to 2000 DPI. That's an awesome feature to have. Another thing I want to talk about in terms of build quality is that with the Xtool P2, I had a screw drop down in it, and it went into a specific compartment that I couldn't reach from inside the machine. So I was trying to get access to it, but in order to do that, you have to flip the machine vertically, remove the bottom, which had like 7 or 8 screws or something like that, just to get to a specific compartment and then put it all back together. Whereas the Thunderbolt, it's got a lid and a front gate that can open, and it's got side compartments that have handles on them that you can easily access. So that's a huge selling point, to be able to service your machine and access parts on your own without having to send a machine back. Because with the Xtool P2, you may have to send it back to fix something if you can't do it on your own, whereas the Bolt, everything is accessible by the customer, and we've got videos and articles on how to fix anything you can think of. How loud are these machines? What kind of noise are they going to produce in your home? I know a very important thing to think about is if you're going to be putting this in a craft room in your house, or a spare bedroom, or maybe even your garage, how loud are they going to be? Are you going to really disturb your family members, or is this going to be a nuisance to you, right? So I measured the P2 and the Bolt at the front of the machines and the back of the machines with a decibel meter. And what I got is that the P2 ranged from 77 decibels to 87 decibels, whereas the Bolt was 68 to 74. And so I pulled up a little chart here that gave me examples for each of those measurements. So at 60 something decibels, which is what the Bolt is, a normal conversation like I'm having here is about the same decibel meter, and then also dishwashers are around 60. And then in the 80s, you're looking at a police siren, a noisy restaurant, hair dryers, blenders, power tools. So it's a lot louder of a machine. And I'll be honest, that's the first thing I noticed when I set both of these up, is how quiet the Bolt is and how loud the P2 is. Okay, so to bring everything to a close here, I'm going to give my final thoughts on both machines, listing some of the pros and the cons that really stood out to me. So I'll go first with the Bolt. The pros of the Bolt are the fast engraving speed, so how quickly you can get products created. The different lens options offer you a variety of different ways that you can use the machine. The customer service and support is high up on that list, because your machine's going to inevitably break down or have something happen at one point or another, and knowing that you're going to have somebody that's willing to help you very quickly is super important. The build quality of the Bolt is top notch, and also the RF tube being air cooled and having a finer beam, which creates a higher resolution, that really stood out for me. Some of the cons when comparing to the P2 are that it's a little heavier than the P2, although both of them will require 2 people to move it, as Elijah and I know. but this one is a little bit heavier. Also, it's a little higher in price. So currently, like I said at the beginning of the video, this one's $5,500, that one's $4,500, so it's $1,000 more. But as we've said, with that, you're getting faster speeds, more detail, better support, better build quality. The machine will last longer, so it's well worth the $1,000. And the last con for the Bolt is that it only has a front pass-through, so you can remove this front gate here and then slide something into the machine, but it won't pass all the way through. Now to get to the P2, the things that stood out as pros for the P2 were the optional features that they have, being the riser base or the conveyor system and the rotary option, just like the Bolt has as well. Also that it's really lightweight, so kind of going against what I was saying with the Bolt, a little heavier, a little more lightweight. Also, the P2 is very easy to set up. So they've got these little pamphlets that come with it. They have a QR code that link you to videos, and it was extremely easy to get that thing set up and running. The only issues that I came across were the software being a little weird to start off with, since I know Lightburn way better. There's just some oddities there, but overall it was really easy to set up. The cons would be that it's very, very slow at engraving and then accelerating, which, I mean, some of these projects took twice as long, 3 times longer, and that's just really unacceptable for the price that you're paying for the machine. Next would be the limited Lightburn compatibility. So as I stated earlier, Lightburn allows you to control your machine a lot more, and the P2 just you can't use all the features that come with the P2 that really attract you towards the P2 with Lightburn. So that was a real downside to me. Also, the limit on the DPI, being that you can only get 700 on the P2, but you can get up to 2,000 on the Bolt. That's something to consider. The all plastic build, the Z-axis limitation, and the long wait time with support. So I want to speak a little more towards the Z-axis. So I've talked about the riser base that you can get with this machine, but there's no auto Z. So what that means is the bed does not move up and down with the touch of a button. With this one, you have to move this tray, I don't know the name for it, but you stick a tray within the riser base and you have to move that closer and closer to the laser head in order to get in focus, whereas everything is automated on the Bolt machine. All right, so my real opinions of these two machines. So again, I work for Thunder Laser USA, so I am gonna have a little bit of a bias towards the Thunderbolt here, but I hope that what I've showed you today is very factual and it's been very helpful to you. I've tried to take my opinions out of it as much as I can, but these opinions that I have come from 4 years of experience using laser machines. I've used an Xtool P2, obviously. I've used the Thunder laser machines. I've used an Omtech. I've used a Boss. I've used the Aeon. Haven't got the pleasure of using an Epilogue or a Totech yet, but I'd like to be able to touch all of them anyways. My opinions come from experience using laser machines. So I want to give the P2 some credit because I think their design of the machine looks great. It's very appealing, and they're doing some great things over there at Xtool with their ability to come out with new machines that are pushing the limits to what the industry is currently doing. So they're doing an excellent job. In a vacuum, the P2 isn't a bad machine. Some of the features that it has are really eye-catching, but what I want to say about those is not all of them really translate into real-world use cases, right? And like I said, in a vacuum, it's a great machine, but when you're comparing it directly to the Bolt, the $1,000 price difference is very worth it for the features and the faster speeds and the better support that you're getting with a Thunder Laser Bolt. So I hope this has been helpful to you guys. If you have questions, please leave them in the comments or reach out to our sales team. You can reach out to us at sales@thunderlaserusa.com. We'd be happy to help you, and we can even hop on a call if you'd like. Thanks again.